There you go. Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. My name is Jeff Echols. I'm Senior Advisor and Head of Marketing for Shadow Partners, and I'm joined today by Marc Goldman. Hi, Marc.
Hey, Jeff.
Marc is a, why don't you
tell us who you
myself,
are? Yes. I'm, amongst other things, I'm the Director of AEC Industry Solutions at ESRI and a longtime contributor to the AEC industry in general through a bunch of roles over the many years.
Yeah. I mean, you said amongst other things. There is a long list of other things that you're involved with. What else are you doing?
Just in the last year, I have become pretty active in a number of industry associations. Building Smart, I'm on one of the steering committees for infrastructure and also involved in the working group on digital twins and GIS and BIM. I'm a co-chair of a digital twin BIM committee through National Institute of Building Sciences. I am very active in the Digital Twin Consortium, co-chairing the AECO committee, and an avid cyclist and trying to earn my private pilot's license.
Nice. All right. I need to ride home, by the way.
Okay, well, I'm not ready yet. No,
Okay.
no passengers yet. Sorry.
Next time.
Yeah.
So you mentioned digital twins.
Yep.
And a lot of the things that you mentioned are very data heavy. The GIS, the BIM, it's all that's the industry, right?
It really is.
That's what we're running on now. And so one of the things that you and I, when we were talking yesterday, you were talking about data and graphs and understanding, right? Because we're collecting data, we're inputting data, but what do we do with it? How do we understand it? So can you tell me a little bit about what you were telling me yesterday in terms of what do you do with all that data?
Yeah, I mean, it's really an interesting time. I'm seeing a real shift from heavy file-based workflows, whether it's CAD files or BIM files or spreadsheets or even images that get generated into files, to really being data that we access through services and then combine those to glean the insights that we need to make decisions. So, whether it's Autodesk with a new product called Forma that is very much moving away from files into truly data, GIS, which since really its inception has been all about files and layers of data that you bring together and combine and run reports on. And you might generate a map file, you might use shape files to exchange with other folks, but these days it's really all about the data that resides on servers and pulling what you need from a specific region, a specific query, and again, just being able to make decisions based on data, not files that you then need to interpret.
Yeah. So we're not going to turn the camera around because we'll get all washed out and backlit, but we're in San Francisco right now. It's an incredible view out here. We're in San Francisco because AIA, American Institute of Architects, their annual conference on architecture is going on right now. And yesterday I was walking the floor. I know you were as well. And I was trying to pay attention to what are the booths, who are the vendors that people are paying the most attention to, where are the biggest lines, beyond what somebody's giving away, et cetera, right? The socks or t-shirts or Legos or whatever. And
I didn't see Legos.
I'll tell you where they are. I think predictably there are a lot of people at the booths that claim something to do with AI, generative design, like you said, BIM or GIS or anything like that. That's the world that we're in. That's the world where practice is happening right now. The deliverables are coming out of that. But when you're talking about what do you do with that data, to me, when we're talking about innovation in the built environment, that has to be part of the next steps.
Yeah.
Because for a long time we've collected that data, and if we're honest about it, and some of the Shadow Ventures portfolio companies, of course they're based on data, but they're also, how do we use this data? Project management tools, which is not what you're talking about, or it's not your realm, but project management tools. Hey, we collect all this data, but we don't ever do anything with it. We put it in a spreadsheet and it goes there to die.
And then we do our next project and we don't refer to it because it's just some static file typically, or data that is not consumable, or we don't know how to consume it for the next project to learn from it. And I think that we're at a tipping point where the massive amounts of information that we have collected over the years is becoming this repository that we tap into through AI, through large learning models, through things like knowledge graphs that we talked about yesterday, connecting data sets that historically didn't have a common key or a common field that you could connect them. but you explicitly define relationships between data sets that help you understand things that you know are related, but you didn't know how to connect them previously.
Right.
I think that's happening. A couple of the booths that I stopped by, just to echo what you said, they are moving from files to data. They're using their data sources to help make better decisions in the next project. A construction company might have decades of schedules that they've created over the years for projects. They know whether or not those projects were delivered successfully through a number of metrics, but they start over with just the same template. They don't necessarily pull from that data to make better decisions on the next project. That's I think something of the past. I think that we're going to finally figure out these treasure chests of data that we've been storing on hard drives are now available to be tapped into, a la ChatGPT and more customized solutions.
Different open AIs and such.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And again, just looking around yesterday, there are plenty of people looking at different products, manufacturers, et cetera, which makes complete sense because of where we are and who's here.
Yeah.
But we're talking about innovation in the built environment, which is what you care about. It's what we at Shadow care about. I think you're exactly right. It's what are we going to do? How do we use this efficiency, richness, et cetera, et cetera. So I love these kinds of conversations. I appreciate you joining me for this one today.
Fun to do.
If you're out there watching this either live or in the future, in a time shifted version, if you value conversations like this, coming up later this year in October, we're going to host Shadow Summit. And I just popped the URL up on the bottom left of your screen right now, shadowsummit.com. One thing that really sets Shadow Summit apart is it's designed to be intimate, 200, 250 people, probably max. And the conversations are not surface level conversations. They're conversations like these that go even deeper into what do we do with this? Here's what happened in terms of innovation in the built environment throughout 2023. Here's what's coming, what you need to plan for, what you need to budget for in 2024. Those are the conversations that are going to happen at Shadow Summit in Atlanta, October 25th and 26th. So if you want to know more about that, we're actively updating the website now with schedules and room blocks and all of those good logistical things. So go to shadowsummit.com. And I'll be back Monday. Today's Friday, right? I'll be back Monday for another Shadow Short. Mark, thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
It's been
really
a lot
fun
of fun
talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, we may sit up here for a while.
Yeah. Grab a cup of coffee or something.
We might. Or something. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If you're new around here, if you've never seen one of these before, let me introduce myself. I'm Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing at Shadow Partners. And today I am joined by Henry Nutt. He is a pre-construction executive at Southland Industries, and he's an author. We'll talk about his new book here in just a second. But Henry, welcome to Shadow Shorts. Thanks for carving out a time and doing this from your car. Actually, this is one of the beauties of the technologies that we have available to us today, that you can do this from anywhere in the world. So thanks for doing this.
Absolutely, Jeff. This is actually kind of a unique morning for me. I have an appointment where I'm going to be speaking to a group of young people trying to enter the industry. I've been there a few times, but it's a location where I still need to use my map to get there. So I'm driving there and trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to go in their office and use their facilities to have this discussion. And suddenly my phone decides that the map was going to freeze on me when I'm about 5 minutes away. And I ended up having to pull in the parking lot, and here I am. So yeah, technology allows us to do that. So that's a great thing.
It is a great thing. Yeah. And there's the pros and the cons to all this technology that we talk about. It's great when it works, and when it doesn't, well, that's a different thing. But that's kind of a nice segue, I think, because we had planned on talking about the future of the construction industry, which could mean a lot of things. Obviously, you write about a number of maybe more people focused things in your book, and that may be one of the most important resources that we have when we look out into the future. Again, we talk about technology a lot, but when you're thinking about the people in the industry, when you're thinking about the future of the construction industry, what's top of mind for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. And for me, it's really about the health, the mental well-being, the psychological safety of the people entering the industry. It's the new folks that maybe didn't come up the way that I did in regards to having a dad that showed you the ropes and or came from the industry and can kind of you just kind of adapt, or you were doing it as a kid. So it's easy just to kind of get in the groove of it. And you don't necessarily have that type of training and development going on with younger people, and it's been a tough industry. And so how do we make sure that the people who are coming in are ready, that actually they want to do it? As you think the stigma that lies on construction in regards to it's just for the tough guys, and the boys don't cry and all that kind of mentality. And when we recognize, we really look at the statistics that exist in our industry with the suicide rates, the lack of care, and also the substance abuse that exists within our industry, it's not healthy. And so those are some very important topics that we have to address. We have to re-image the industry, and really, what does it look like for people? Why should they even want to enter it? It's cool, it's fun, it looks exciting, being on these buildings and doing these things and working on large equipment and bringing in these huge components and all that, but at the same time, we haven't done well with how we take care of the people that are on the ground doing the jobs. And so there's a lot of folks around doing that, having those conversations now. And that's really my focus. I've done a lot with lean construction. I'm the current chair of LCI, but what I emphasize my time with is that respect for people, which is one of our tenets for LCI. And what does that look like? What does that genuinely look like? And as a superintendent for 12 years at Southland, I got a chance to really execute in that fashion, where I worked working for a company that really does put people first, and having the opportunity to not only think about the time, the productivity, the physical safety, the performance on the projects, but actually the people and how they're doing, and making sure they show up to work, ready to work, and giving their full selves to the job because they're not preoccupied with all these other things. And so we just haven't made space for that as an industry, for conversations that do that check in with people. And I put my mindset to that's where I want to put my energy towards, and really think about how do we make sure that when people show up to work, that in this industry specifically, that they can come uh, with an understanding that if their day is not going well, if there's issues happening that will affect their job, their safety, that they can talk about that, and they won't be punished or penalized or ostracized, or blackballed, and all the things that unfortunately we've done for ages. So those are the things that are important to me, and I think that's the contribution that I made with my book, and just what we do as a company, and to be able to have people you work with that operate that way really gives you the confidence and security, to say, yeah, this is okay to do.
So when I think about that, and I hear you saying that, and I think there are probably a lot of companies out there, and you may agree or not with this, but that are at least giving lip service to this. I think a lot of what you just said may fall into that category of it sounds simple, but it may not be easy. So how do we start to, because changing tides and a lot of years of tradition and other things behind what you're saying. So how do we start to implement what you're talking about? How do we create initiatives or push initiatives that make sure that what you care about, what you're just describing, is actually becoming reality in the industry?
Yeah, that's an important conversation to have as well. And so it's easy enough to say we're going to throw some initiatives together and talk about 5 points, and then we're going to roll this program out, right? And you know what happens when you do that. Many times it just falls to the ground, or you get people that just don't believe that you're really serious about it. So a few years back on a project, I was with a group of people, and there was a gentleman that asked a question: what is the most important thing or aspect of our industry to you for this team? One word. and this was an executive for this $1 billion project for his particular team, and he said empathy. And it honestly struck me that, because I didn't expect that word to come out of his mouth, and he really explained it and talked about why this matters. And when you actually can identify with someone and understand why they're dealing with their issue, why they may show up in a way that may not look normal, or it's different from what you're used to seeing, but you have no way to attach the why to that. You don't understand really intricately, or be able to put yourself in their shoes and say, I get it. When you can do that, then you can begin to roll out programs and initiatives that really will meet people where they live, because you're not trying to address it from a compliance standpoint. You're trying to address it from a very human standpoint, and you're going to be holistic about the process. And so you have to get, and that's where that the simple versus easy kind of thing goes into play. Is like, it sounds easy, right? But it's not, and it requires something that we don't spend a lot of time giving ourselves energy towards to think about, or thinking or considering the depth of what it means to actually empathize with someone, what you have to do personally to go to that place yourself. And it's not easy for a lot of people to do that, and especially with an industry that has not essentially condoned this kind of behavior, where you actually care about people. You consider how they're doing. It's just not been that industry. So I think it's really important. And one of our superintendents several months back told me, he wrote me an email, and he said to me that he heard me use the word empathy years ago, and he said that word doesn't belong in this industry. And he said it to himself, and he told me this later, that this is how I felt. But he got a chance to get exposed to different people that don't look like him, and whether they're women or people of color, and he had a chance to like work with them for several years and engage and see that they have the same aspirations, desires, goals. They want to provide for their families just like anyone else. But the one thing they may not have is an opportunity. They may not have the connection in the industry. And so as he began to be engaged in this kind of work and see some of the people that he got a chance to hire, he really recognized that, man, I missed it. But he developed an empathetic mindset, heart, and begin to see all people as opportunities in regards to providing those opportunities. And so he had to have his own personal kind of transformation, and we say in the lean world, your own aha moment. And that was his aha moment, where it becomes something that he does because it's not just about doing the right thing, it's something that he cares about. And then he becomes a spokesperson for it, which means I can go do something else, right? And
Yeah.
so it's kind of recreating yourself and other people. And so he genuinely does this work now, and has a passion for it, and probably has a larger audience than I do. And so it's understanding how important those things are, and getting those key strategic people involved and helping them develop empathy. It doesn't mean that you're feeling sorry for people. It just means that you understand that everyone doesn't walk in the same shoes. And when you understand their shoes and how they fit on you, it's easier to recognize some of the pros, the cons, some of the complexities, some of the obstacles, and not to make excuses for people, but just to recognize that, you know what, everybody can't do what I did because they didn't have the same opportunities that I had.
Yeah, yeah. That's to me that's intriguing because we talk a lot about change and innovation here at Shadow Shorts, and in this environment of venture capital and investing in innovation for the built environment. And I think part of what you're talking about is actually quite innovative, but it's coming from a completely different direction than we would think of as a SaaS software or a robot in construction or something like that. Um, so I appreciate you bringing that perspective. Do you see it as innovative in any way?
I do, and I had someone that shared that with me several years ago, and just use that word, that this is innovative thinking. And when we think about change in this industry, the revolutionary changes that have happened in this industry in regards to technology, processes, um, innovation with lean construction and prefab and modularization and all those things that we do, that it's easy to coin the phrase or the term that it's innovative. But we think about people. We think about how we engage with people and how we have to transform how we do that. It's an innovation. And if people would understand it to that level, they'd recognize that, hey, I want to be better. I want to provide an end product that is competitively put together. I want to have great productivity numbers on my job. I want to meet my deadlines. I want to do my job safer. All those things are factored into this kind of innovation and this innovative thinking, which is how we engage people and how we train our leadership to be more deliberate in regards to how we deliver that, how we engage those folks, and we can't use the same old styles of thinking and terminology and ideas. And it's change, it's transformation, it's innovation. And so it's absolutely that. And that's how I coin it and talk with people about it, to kind of help. Sometimes it's speaking the language that people understand, and not getting the kind of deer in the headlights. And when you say something like DEI or something like that, people get afraid and they start wondering, where's he going to go with this conversation? Is it a black and white thing? And so sometimes it is just that, but many times it's not. And so it's a matter of how you engage in the conversation in order to have the greatest impact. And you got to know your audience. You got to know who you're talking to, and what their proclivities are, what their concerns may be, where they go when you use words that may trigger them, and knowing that if I want to be effective, if my objective is to really try to accomplish something, then I need to figure out the best way to convey the message. And innovation is key to that process.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. Henry, thanks so much for this conversation today. It's a shadow short, so we have to keep it short, but this is one that we could probably carry on for a few hours if we both had the time. Tell us the name of your book and where we can get it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it's been great, Jeff. Appreciate it. So my book, it's called 7 Principles: Creating Success, Creating Your Success in the Construction Industry. You can find it on Amazon. You can also find it on my website at hgn3partners.com. And it's a great little handbook. It's only about 87 pages, but it's designed for folks who maybe not like to read. And it'll hopefully intrigue you and help the younger folks understand how to create their own pathway, and hopefully some of the legacy folks to understand how to communicate more effectively to those people entering our industry.
Great. I love it. So go pick up Henry's book at Amazon, work through it, and see what innovation you can make in the realm of the way that you deal with people and the way that you see yourself in the profession or in the industry. Henry, thanks again so much for doing this. To all of you out there that watch this either live or in some time shifted manner, thank you for this. We'll be back tomorrow for another Shadow Short. And until then, I hope you have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing at Shadow Partners, and we've launched this effort that we call Shadow Shorts so that we can have conversations with the best and the brightest in the world of the built environment, and specifically those that are focusing on innovation in the built environment. And I am pleased to be joined today by Steve Weikel. He is the industry chair of the Real Estate Transformation Lab at MIT, amongst other things, of course. And we were just talking backstage before we went live. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. This is going to be a lot of fun. So, Steve, thank you. Welcome. Glad that you're here today.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm delighted to be here as well.
So, as we were talking, as we were getting ready, one of the things that we sort of touched on was this idea of built environment transition, or BET. So what, for those of us that don't know what built environment transition is, what does that mean, and what are you working on there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. It's actually a kind of a new inquiry that we're making at the Center for Real Estate in the lab, and the built environment transition. We are seeing some meta trends or mega trends that are impacting the built environment. Some really big ones, and these will be familiar to your listeners: climate change, breakthroughs in science and technology, sociogeographic trends, for example, hybrid work, which is really about the people. It's not the built environment responds to these kind of social changes that are happening. And we think, and by the way, those are just kind of three big ideas. There are other things going on, but we think this is going to cause, as my colleague, Professor Dennis Frenchman says, an epic reordering of the planet. Now, there might be a little hyperbole in there, but on the other hand, there's going to be a significant kind of reordering of the built environment and the various aspects that we all work in.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's when I think of built environment, right, coming from an architecture background, of course, in my past, we would be designing things, we'd be designing the built environment, but you could never do that in a vacuum because it has an impact on the people, has an impact on the planet, of course, all of these things that we talk about. So it makes sense that that's a two-way street, or even, multiple different avenues there. So when you think about the three that you named off and beyond, what's going to have the biggest impact, or are you even measuring in terms of relative scale?
Oh, yeah, great question. So I defer to some other research that's been done. We've done some research on it at MIT, but let me throw some numbers out to you, and people can follow up. You can Google some of this stuff. McKinsey has been writing about this. Fifth Wall, a big VC, has been talking about some of these elements. There was a recent work from home and office report from, I think, some researchers from Harvard and one of the other colleges. But let me give you some numbers. The retrofitting the existing energy and land use infrastructure, which would include real estate, but retrofitting that to net zero is expected to trigger $275 trillion in spending through 2050. So that's with a T. Even if McKinsey is off by 100%, it's still a huge number. So that would be net zero retrofitting kind of our world for net zero. Now, Greg Smithies from Fifth Wall has said that estimates that existing commercial buildings might require anywhere from 18 to $36 trillion to decarbonize. So is that a subset of that big number? Yeah, probably by some measures. The other one from that Harvard report on the impact of remote work on U.S. commercial office property is estimated to cause a destruction of value of $413 billion. That's with a B, fortunately. So when you start talking about those numbers, and there are a couple of other ones, and so we think there could be a $350 trillion opportunity, whether you are decarbonizing, whether you're repurposing, whether you're building new, whether you're working on old. I actually think the retrofit part is the most intriguing. Maybe you would too as an architect. So those are the kinds of numbers that we're looking at. So if you're a real estate developer, or if you're an occupier, or if you're a startup, Shadow is deep into the early stage as we are in some things as well with startups and founders and VC. This is going to be an immense change to our world in our lifetime, I think, is the key takeaway.
Yeah, you're naming off, numbers with T's and B's. And, I'm thinking, I'm no economist, right? I'm just this guy that got a calculator and 10 fingers. That sounds to me like numbers that are greater than the GDP of many nations on the planet.
Yes.
And you're simply talking about transition. You're simply talking about how this is going to change. That's really amazing. What do you see? You're focused on real estate. So where do you see the biggest focus in these areas maybe early on?
Yeah, great question, because it's going to take in our lifetime, So this is not a let's fix it this year issue.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'll mention that the center has this really great lens on real estate because we're within the School of Architecture and Planning, not in the business school, like a lot of other programs. Now, being in the business school is a great place to be as well, and we do the hardcore finance and the economics. But to be together with the architects and the planners and the media lab, as I mentioned, is also part of our school within MIT. So we get this holistic view of what's happening. And what that means is that we don't just look at the building. We really look at context, cities, transit, infrastructure, the people. So there are all of these, as you and I both know now, that the real estate industry can't just look at buildings anymore. We have to look at the whole thing. So to answer your question, then, I think that climate is probably the most pressing. It all seems to be connected to climate. And so when you look at demographic shifts and migratory kind of global migration, if you're looking at those sociogeographic, often that's related to climate. And if you're looking at science and technology, often that's related to climate. So I think the alarms have been sounded. This has been percolating. And it just seems to me, and I don't know, maybe you have a different perspective, but it seems to me that in the last couple of years, just recently, the alarm bells are really loud about if we don't do something, we might really be in a jam.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the climate, to answer your question, I think climate, the center's doing some work on how do we retrofit? Is there some kind of standard way that we can retrofit and then determine value? Because it does add value, but if you don't have data, you can't prove it to the industry. So, you have these early adopters that are kind of flying without a net. That's why I think climate is going to be the key thing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, like you said, many of these things, or all of these things, they're intertwined. Right? You can't separate them from each other. So it makes sense that would be maybe the big driver. And when we talk about innovation, as you mentioned, Shadow Ventures has a number of portfolio companies that are focused on, we would typically say, on sustainability, but we're talking about climate, right? And so I think it makes sense to think that a lot of the innovation that needs to happen is going to be focused in that direction. Do you, as you look out across the landscape, do you see anything, whether it's in-house at MIT or beyond, that maybe other people are investing in or researching? Do you see anything that excites you in this realm?
Yeah, a lot of it excites me. Probably because I'm a technology optimist. I think that we can, and maybe it's because I'm at MIT, where it's not always the answer, but I think there are solutions through technology that we can really maybe take the edge off or win the race, win the battle. One area. So you mentioned climate and sustainability, and sometimes people use resiliency. Those are all good terms. What's interesting, though, is these emerging kind of subcategories. So when you talk about climate, you can talk about decarbonization, which is an interesting category. Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. So if you're a startup or a VC, are you interested in helping buildings reduce their energy consumption, sort of a Scope 1? Are you interested in helping the grid and the generation of power in new, innovative ways? Maybe you invest in kind of modular micronuclear, possibly, just as an example. That's sort of a Scope 2, and a Scope 3 might be how are you tracing the carbon footprint of the wood that goes into the module that then gets converted into the part that goes into my building. How do we? So the Scope 3 is the hard one, right? How do we understand the kind of food chain of carbon? So that carbon area is interesting. There's a kind of an area of that where, what about carbon capture? I saw a great example. I don't know if it has an MIT connection, maybe it does, where they think they can capture carbon through the air handlers on the HVAC system.
Wow. Okay.
So how cool would that be? I mean, in Iceland, you've got this enormous multi-billion-dollar big vacuum cleaner that's sucking carbon out of the air, which is great. But what if we could incrementally kind of capture it out of the air when it's going through the building, which we already do anyway. We already move air around in buildings. So that's kind of exciting. It has a science element. It has a startup element. It has a carbon element. That's pretty neat. So anyway, those are, I'm kind of thinking of one other example I'll give you from MIT is using LiDAR to do sort of an MRI on a building to understand, because we really don't know how the buildings perform from a mechanical standpoint. As an architect, I'm sure you struggle with that. How do you go back and measure when there are no tools or sensors or anything in place? So rather than in an old building, right, you could go in and spend a bunch of money on sensors, but what if you could do a LiDAR scan like you put it in a big MRI machine at the hospital? So that's another neat one.
That to me is super interesting. We were talking before. In my graduate level pro practice class, I run it like a startup incubator, and so the students go through. They come, what's the problem that needs to be solved, et cetera, business plan, and then we pitch it as Shark Tank at the end. And a couple of years ago, a student was focused on existing, sometimes maybe historic buildings, but their idea was creating a dashboard that required a lot of sensors, right? As you said. And so that idea of the LiDAR doing that MRI type scan, I think is fascinating. Maybe that would have been the next iteration of their idea had they continued that project beyond the class.
And you could scan inside and outside. There's another company that I met with that does LiDAR. You walk around on the inside of the building, and there are other methods to do this, but it's getting so much faster and cheaper. And even not to discount sensors, because sensors are getting down to pennies a piece. So you could just put them all over the building. And now in a way that we weren't able to do when they were $100 a piece or $50 a piece. Sure.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point too. As we think about innovation and we're going where we're going here, being able to utilize these things in some practical, the vacuum in Iceland versus the HVAC system in my building, right? Being able to develop some module that's repeatable, that's easily repeatable and usable. I think that's going to move the needle for us. This is a fascinating conversation. If you're out there watching this, maybe in the future or listening to this now, these are the types of conversations that we want to have here with Shadow Shorts. And if you want more conversations like this, we've got an event coming up. It'll be the 7th annual for Shadow Ventures. It's called Shadow Summit. It'll be in Atlanta, October 24th through 26th. And these are the exact kinds of conversations that we will have there. This is not a conference that you're going to go to and get sort of this superfluous level conversations about sustainability, et cetera. We go deep. One of my colleagues, Ian, said that's what's unique about this conference is every single one of these conversations is basically geeking out on a topic, and that's fantastic. I love that. Our CEO, KP Reddy, said that Shadow Summit 2023 will be a recap of everything that's happened in terms of innovation in the built environment and a preview of what will happen, what you need to plan for, what you need to budget for as you look at innovation in the built environment for 2024. So if you want more information, we're constantly updating the site now, shadowsummit.com. Schedule will be out, speakers will be out very, very soon. So go to shadowsummit.com to find more information about that. Steve, if people want to know specifically about what's going on in your area at MIT or anything else that you're working on, where should they go? How do they contact you?
A couple of resources. One would be the MIT Center for Real Estate website, which is cre.mit.edu. Sign up for the newsletter that we send out every month that gives updates on the research from the various labs. I think that's a great resource. The other possible resource is the Sensible City Lab within the School of Architecture and Planning. Also the Media Lab website. And actually, the School of Architecture and Planning has their own newsletter about what's happening throughout the MIT community related to the built environment. So any of those would be good resources. I think the Center for Real Estate is probably the one that is aggregates the most relevant and useful information for people in the industry.
Sure, that's great. This is another one of those conversations that I would love to continue this for about another hour, but it's called Shadow Shores, so we gotta wrap it up.
Totally understood, but glad to come back anytime.
Absolutely. I'm going to take you up on that. I really appreciate you being here. So thank you to all of you out there that are watching this or listening to this. This has been Shadow Shores with Steve Weikel, Industry Chair of the Real Estate Transformation Lab at MIT. My name is Jeff Echols. I am a Senior Advisor and the Head of Marketing at Shadow Partners. So we'll see you tomorrow with another Shadow Short. And until then, have a great day. Steve, thanks a lot. Really appreciate you for this. And let's talk again soon, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.